Expect the unexpected. It's our theme this Christmas, but one of the things that I know we can all expect this time of year is the reality that some measure of stress is correlated with this season. Whether that is maybe a low grade stress, maybe it's like the next level of anxiety or a legitimate worry or just straight on depression. That there is something about this contrast of the holiday season that maybe for you is that, maybe it's an existing stress that has been exasperated by the uniqueness of this past year and some of the challenges of it. And maybe it's the uniqueness of this past year that's created all new ones. Maybe in the context of, your closest relationships, your friendships, your family. Maybe it's in your work or your career, or your future or finances, or just your dynamics, just your rhythms. It's all going to probably put us in one of these categories to some measure, to some degree this year. And so I want to speak to that. And I think about a friend of mine who, kind of on the worry meter, has some pretty legitimate stuff in his life to be worried about. And, so he goes to the scriptures to explore, okay, what does God's word say about what I should do about worry? And comes across a verse like Philippians 4:6, which says, what do you do about worry? It says this, Philippians 4:6, do not worry. Okay. Other translation says, do not be anxious for anything. Okay. Another translation puts says, be anxious for nothing. Okay, helpful, but not helpful, right? And so I came across a perspective on this verse that I never caught before that I found super helpful in a season where I needed it, and I hope it's an encouragement to you as well. And it's simply this idea that comes actually from the prophet Elijah in the Old Testament. If you're unfamiliar, he was, kind of the crowning example of a guy who was following God, loved God, he was a prophet for God. In fact, in one situation, he goes toe-to-toe with 850 false prophets, where they're both kind of calling down from their God, or gods in the other case, to bring fire upon these sacrifices. And basically nothing happens for the other one. The one true God of the Bible sends down lightning, blows up this sacrifice, and it burns it up, even though it's like drenched in water. It's like the epic light show faithfulness of God situation. And Elijah could not be reaching any earthly higher high for what God could provide in his life. But then right after that, the one who Elijah was up against, King Ahab and his wife, Queen Jezebel, she's nasty. And so she comes after him with everything, and he goes from the highest high to the lowest low. He's running for his life, and he is absolutely terrified that he's going to be killed. And then get this, he gets away, and then his prayer to God is this: God, take my life. Did you catch that? His greatest fear is that he will die, and his prayer is to die. And, as you think about that, the one thing that if you've been in that space of anxiety and worry and darkness and depression and struggle, is that the one thing that you can logically, rationally count on is that you are not going to be thinking logically and rationally. Just enough to know how much you don't know and how much you're not thinking straight. And that's where Elijah's at. The cool thing about the way this story ends is God does show up. He shows his faithfulness even in the midst of some poor choices Elijah makes, that we'll get to here in a sec. And at the end of his ministry, really the end of his life, there's this scene where he's passing on his ministry to his apprentice Elisha, and Elijah is literally swept up by a chariot from heaven that takes him up into heaven. And so Elijah and this other guy, Enoch, in the Bible, they're the only two guys throughout all of Scripture that we know of that never tasted earthly death like we will all taste. And here's the crazy thing. The one thing that Elijah feared the most never even happened. He never actually even experienced death, even on the flip side of that trial. And you could say it this way, that it turned out that Elijah was, Philippians 4:6, in a different way. He was anxious for nothing. It turned out to be nothing. The very thing he feared the most, he didn't even have to face. And I don't know about you, but I know for me, there are things that I have been up against in my anxiety, worried, the whole thing, that have been grounded in some sort of not yet happened, but fear it might happen, that never actually happens. That for the most part, so much of our anxiety is chasing down things that will never actually happen, or maybe it does happen and it's not as bad as we thought, or maybe it happens and it's way worse than we thought, in real honesty. But the reality, just like in Elijah's case, that God will see you through that difficulty, and he's with you in it. And so that's what I want to look at over these next few weeks, to offer some encouragement and some direction, really between the weekends, as we expect the unexpected and expecting God to work. And so I want to just challenge you this first session, if you will, with this idea, and that is who? That's the question. There's a lot of things we could go with. I'm just going to ask you who. Because the mistake that Elijah made is that he had his right-hand companion in ministry, his sidekick, that he actually, after this whole Jezebel chasing thing, he goes it alone. He leaves the one good friend he had. He goes it alone, and I would argue that for many of us, it's when we need community or relationship or to express something the most that we often will go it alone. And so I would say, who is it that you need to share this stress with? Maybe it's someone you're already in a relationship with. Maybe it's a rekindling of a friendship you need to go to. If you don't know where to go, I would encourage you to reach out to us at the church. Just go to the website at firstdecatur.org, and there's a contact us button. And we have a counseling ministry, and so we can help you with that, or maybe get you hooked up with someone in life at the church who's kind of been there, done that. We don't want you to go through this alone. So find that person. Let us help you find that person. And that's what I would ask. I would say, who? Because I know for me, in the situation that I'm referring to, for me, when I first came across this understanding, that the breakthrough for me was when I finally got it out, when I shared it, when I found a trusted friend who I just, it says in James that when we confess our sin, confess our stuff, there's healing in that process. Maybe not right away, but it's definitely a key ingredient in the process. And so I encourage you to find that person as we step through each week. Just how can we move through some unexpected work of God as we face the expected stress of this season? And from there, we'll also see, of course, this weekend, either in person or online for worship, firstdecatur.org/churchonline, or in the building, 5 o'clock Saturday, Sunday, 9/11. We'll see you then.